Just to say, brothers and sisters, this is Africa Speaks with Al Kebulan, hosted by the Al Kebulan Revivalist Movement. And we are blessed, brothers and sisters, to have as a guide, as a leader, as somebody who has continued to do tremendous work in supporting the liberation fight of our people. We want to give thanks and praises to our spiritual leader, Brother Leader Mbandaka, and also to his right-hand woman, his queen, his best friend, none other than the great Sister Kai Awagadao Mbandaka. And we also want to give a big shout to the grandchildren. We had a few birthdays yesterday, a few Earth Days for the children. And we just want to say Makoro Koto to all those princes and princesses who celebrated their Earth Day yesterday at the Chestnuts Community Center. It was a lovely, lovely day. And we give thanks to be able to celebrate those 6 wonderful princes and the other grandchildren as well, Tendai Mari. Okay, Brother Olatunji, we're going to go on with our lecture series. Over to you, my dear brother, Tendai Mari.
Tendai Mari. Following on from the education series that began at the start of last month, tonight we broadcast the first of 3 mini lectures within the context of education and nation building, delivered by renowned education consultant, Sister Rosemary Campbell-Stephens. One of the ideas coming out of last month's series was that in spite of the frequent and lengthy deliberations around education issues, there's a dearth of practical approaches for us to practically employ. The lecture series is designed to address this deficit in an accessible way over the next 3 months on Africa Speaks with Al Kebulan. So tonight we deal with strategies for parents and young people. On November the 5th, we deal with strategies for educators, and on December the 3rd, strategies for the community. Some of the ideological and philosophical discussions around what's best environment for our children, such as black schools or mainstream schools or even black countries versus white countries, are bound to continue. But the points raised in this series, however, are designed to be applicable in any environment or in any circumstance, as there are few places on the planet, if any, where we have established as a people a comprehensive education system within a nation-building context. Tonight the focus is on parents and young people, and we'll draw upon Sister Rosemary's nearly 40 years as an educator to offer some strategies that can begin to sharpen our approach, not just to education and schooling, but the learning process itself. In this lecture, Sister Rosemary will offer 21 strategies for parents and young people to apply, providing practical, insightful examples. So, sisters and brothers, we're going to go over to our Sister Rosemary Campbell for the first in our lecture series, Education and Nation Building.
Good evening and Tendai Mwari. My name is Rosemary Campbell-Stephens. Today is the first of a 3-part series of strategies to enhance learning. Today's strategies are aimed at parents and young people. I do hope that you find them useful and that you'll be able to add to them ideas of your own so that together we build up better learning habits for effective learners. So before I begin on the 21 strategies, I would like to preface this installment with the following thoughts, based on my nearly 40 years of being an educator. The first thing to say is that these 21 strategies are by no means an exhaustive list. There will be other things that you think about that make for an effective learner. But I do want to focus on practical strategies that parents and young people can incorporate into their current regime. As I think about these 21 strategies, I'm thinking about running a course. And if I were running a course focusing on learning for adults or young people, the emphasis would certainly not be on content, but would be much more a focus on how we learn and learning how we learn. I was really encouraged, inspired actually, by a LinkedIn clip about a group of African boys at St. Bonaventure's School in London. They were studying at 6 p.m. on a Friday evening. A small group of lads, looked like about 5 or 6 students, with a slightly older student moderating the process. And they were caught on camera by an educator, African man, going past and seeing them and then engaging with them in conversation about what they were doing and why they were doing it. And I was inspired because I know these kinds of students exist. I know over the 40 years that students find a way, many students find a way to enhance their learning, and much of that learning happens informally, formally, within their peer groups, and at their own direction. They are the ones that take control of their learning and make it happen. So that clip with the boys from St. Bonaventure's was truly inspiring. Not all of the strategies that I will be talking about can be used every day or applied to every learning situation. So be flexible and be sensible about them. Most of the strategies are applicable to both the informal and the formal learning setting. But again, it's about it being fit for purpose and timing. And so, for example, when I talk about movement, when I talk about hydration during learning, when I talk about questioning, all kinds of strategies that we would want to see incorporated in a learner's behavior, you have to select when it is appropriate, not going to be a distraction in order for you to do so. And I'm kind of taking that as read. So without further ado, let me move in to my list of 21 strategies for learning. And as I said at the beginning, this is not at all an exhaustive list. So strategy number 1, approach enhancing your learning as if you were an athlete in training. What does an athlete in training have to do? Well, A, they have to be fully focused. B, they have to be positive. C, they definitely have to deal with the self-talk. They have to deal with their physical needs, and that means physically training hard. They have to deal with their mental needs. They have to look at their diet. They have to look at who their coach is. They have to be able to motivate themselves, and they have to be able to put in and be willing to put in the work. Number 2, start by acknowledging and logging what you already know. Part of being a learner is understanding that actually you're not an empty vessel. And even when you're approaching a new piece of learning, there are things that you already know on which you can base that learning experience. Number 3, make learning fun or at least enjoyable. There are all kinds of opportunities for learning in life, many of them informal learning, around the home, on trips, in your community, just amongst the things that you do, through your hobbies, what you do with your friends. All of these opportunities create spaces for learning to take place and create less stressful and enjoyable places for learning to take place. So, for example, I often have a notebook on me. I often am capturing images of things that I see. Now, it may have no particular relevance to anything that I'm engaged in at the moment. It just may be something that interests me, but actually I capture moments. I'm in the present. And so learning and taking the opportunity to make it an enjoyable experience is one that should come as naturally as possible. Number 4, when it doesn't happen naturally, seek, plan, be open to and create opportunities for learning. Now, we all know as parents that there are all kinds of opportunities for learning with younger children and also with older children. A trip to the shops, a visit to family, the traveling en route there and back, things that we're engaged in the home, fixing things, making things, creating things, responding to things. There are all kinds of opportunities for us to engage with young people on a learning process or through a learning process. 5, record your learning in a variety of ways. Obviously, use the technology that is at your disposal, your computers, your notebooks, but actually use real notebooks and really write things down. I'll talk a little bit more about the importance of actually physically putting pen to paper later on. Number 6, and this is a subtle one, note carefully how you learn best. So much of our learning is incidental. We go through a process, we learn through that process, but we haven't taken notes of the steps. One of the things that really exceptional learners do is to be mindful of how they learn and to be flexible in understanding that how they might learn in one situation and for one concept or context may be very different to how they learn for another. So, note carefully how you learn best. Number 7, step outside of your comfort zone. Take some calculated risks. If I think about some of the deeper level learning, the learning that's taken me to the next level, much of that has happened when I have stepped outside of my comfort zone and when I have taken some calculated risks in order to learn something new. So, to what extent are we playing it safe in not opening ourselves up to opportunities where we challenge ourselves to learn something new and to really stretch ourselves? Number 8, learn from your mistakes. As parents, we may be a little guarded about mistakes. Sometimes the mistakes that are made have dire consequences, and I think in those situations, obviously, we're more focused on the consequences of those mistakes than any learning opportunity that they might provide. But sometimes we're a little too risk averse. There are mistakes that are made from which people can learn. And those of us who are educators know that more often than not, it's when the experiment goes wrong or when the move that we made on the football pitch doesn't quite work, or when we try that ingredient and it messes up the entire recipe. It's from those mistakes that we learn. So don't write them off as an error with a cross against it. You got the sum wrong. No, you learned from that. And many times, actually, that learning is something that stays with us because we tend not to repeat that mistake again. Number 9, learn about how you learn by learning something new. It's linked to the stepping outside of your comfort zone, but it's just taking that analogy a little bit further. Learn something new. Now, at the moment, one of the things that I'm looking at, because I do a lot of public speaking, a lot of presentations, and some writing, is to use the technology better to produce podcasts. That's not really stepping outside of my comfort zone because I'm very happy in terms of speaking, I'm very happy in terms of doing presentations, and I'm reasonably comfortable with writing, but it is a new skill. And so when I think about the learning process, it's not something that ever stops. In order to be current, in order to be relevant, in order to continue growing, and we want to be all of those things as people, then one of the things that we need to do is to learn by learning something new and applying, of course, what I already know to how I would produce a podcast of my own. Number 10, incentivize yourself to learn. This is directed at young people, but it's also directed at parents in terms of asking parents to incentivize their children to learn, or the young people that they're working with to learn. It's really important to be motivated, and the incentive may not have to be something of monetary or material value. The incentive could be just more time to do something that they really enjoy, or the opportunity to go somewhere and do something that is totally unrelated to the learning experience, or the opportunity for them to take on a new piece of responsibility that you want them actually to earn the right to take on as part of their growth process. So be quite creative, but find incentives to have your children or have the young people that you're working with really want to learn. Number 11, to the students, take the opportunities when appropriate, like the boys from St. Bonaventure's, to learn with your peers. There is so much that we can learn in small groups with our own age group that far outweighs what we try to struggle to learn on our own or in much larger groups where there is much more at stake in terms of public failure. So don't ignore those opportunities to work in groups, and be the one that creates the group. Be the one that suggests, I'd like to really look at such and such and such and such. Why don't we all gather around my house tomorrow night and actually look at this? So create your own study environment. It's really good practice for those of you who might intend to go on to further and higher education anyway, because that's the way that adults learn. You know, it's part of the studying repertoire. So it builds some good practices and some good habits. But do not ignore the opportunities to study with peers. I certainly wish, when I look back on my own experience as a student, that I had done that more. Number 12, practice or apply what you learn to real life situations in order to deepen the level of understanding and learning. And in that respect, become the teacher. When the learner becomes the teacher, it translates that learning to a whole new level. Imagine learning something, applying it to a situation in your real life context, and then having to explain to somebody else how you applied that concept to a real life situation as the teacher. You're now explaining as the teacher. It really completes that cycle of learning. And most good teachers will tell you they've never stopped learning. They're lifelong learners.
Yo, this is Swiss Soul Solid. Africa speaks about cable and Galaxy 102.5. Blaze the fire, fire, fire.
13. Parents, this is directed at you. Encourage young people to be inquiring and questioning. I hear the sigh already. Encourage them to ask more questions. Yes, that's what learners do. If we were to draw up the list of the ideal student, the characteristics that we would look for as teachers, if we were really honest, in the ideal student, particularly at high school, but I wish this list applied in primary and at whatever level that student, that learner was at. Top of my list, really towards the top of my list, would be an inquiring mind. I want somebody who's going to be inquiring, who's going to be questioning, not questioning and challenging for questioning and challenging sake, not questioning and challenging to make other people look stupid or simply to show how bright and clever they are, but actually questioning and challenging to get to a deeper level of understanding. Those are the kinds of things that we want to encourage. And certainly as African people in our homes and in our communities and amongst our families, we should be encouraging our young people to be much more inquiring, much less receptive to the constant media noise that surrounds them, and that is part and parcel of their growing up, and to be asking challenging questions about some of the things that they're seeing and hearing. 14, use the technology available. I talked earlier on about enjoyment. One of the ways that we can enhance the learning experience is to use the technology. And so we want to encourage young people, obviously, to use the technology available. There is so much now that they can find out about online that it would be foolish for us not to encourage proper, guided use of that access to information. However, the caveat, the health warning, do not be lazy. Once you have done that piece of research online, to what extent are you then using it, incorporating it, using it to extend a piece of knowledge, using it to develop a project that you're on, building on it, being creative yourself, and incorporating that into your knowledge bank? Some really practical things that should be happening around the learning situation. Keep the brain hydrated. Number 15, water. Drink water. Whether it be bottled water, good quality water through the pipe, you may have to filter it, just boil it, whatever you have to do. Make sure that water is available to hydrate the brain. And there's lots for us to read up on. And again, I would suggest looking at the internet, because sometimes you don't want to pick up a big heavy book, but you can look at the internet and you can look at some very well written, very well crafted articles, short, accessible, easily readable articles that explain the process of hydration, and particularly hydration of the brain, and how that facilitates the brain functioning at its optimum best. Whilst we're on the subject of hydration, let's move on to cognition. Learn about the cognition of learning and how the brain functions, which parts of the brain are actually responsible for which parts of our functioning, where emotion sits, where spirituality sits, where our ability to communicate sits, where our feelings of stress and fear sit, how the brain functions and actually how the heart functions in relation to the brain and the connection between the two. For example, one of the things that I say often to teachers, and I'll be talking a lot more about this in the strategies for educators, which will be coming next month. One of the things that I talk to educators about is that the process of learning is often looked upon as something that is totally intellectual and therefore related particularly to one very small segment of the brain. But the heart sends more messages to the brain than the brain ever does to the heart. And so we need to look at the importance of emotional engagement with all kinds of things, including the learning process. And good teachers know once you have struck a relationship with your student, actually the intellectual exchange, that's the easy bit. So as a parent wanting to support their child or young person through the learning process, one of the things that you have to do is learn about the learning process and how learning really takes place. And that includes looking at the cognition of learning and how our brain and heart functions. Number 17, be a problem solver. I'll never forget being on a boat off the coast of Barbados many, many years ago, where the chap who was leading the boat trip was talking about some of the magnificent houses that we could see on the coast and how many millionaires and billionaires lived in Barbados. And one of the things that he said as we were going past, he pointed to, this huge mansion, beautiful mansion, and said that, the person who owned that mansion made their money by designing what? Not a spacecraft or, the next cure for cancer, but rings for a shower curtain. Rings for a shower curtain. That's how it started out. It then developed into other things, but essentially that was the basis of their great wealth. Be a problem solver. Problem solvers are people who look around their domestic situation, their real life situation, and come up with problems that need solving. And sometimes they'll be applying science that they didn't even know. How do I keep my mobile phone from becoming super hot? Even though the instruction manual tells me to do this, do that, do the other. We know of so many young people who, before the big companies thought about it, knew how to solve the problem of dropping the mobile phone in water and then having to be able to rescue it. We all know about young people like that. So much of that creativity doesn't necessarily come out in a formal schooling environment. And so are our homes, our families, and our communities spaces where people are given the opportunity, are encouraged to find solutions to problems? Who knows where it could lead? Number 18, let's go to the testy subject of tests. My approach is this. I know that tests are limited. I know that tests are a reality of life. And I know that tests are unlikely to go away from the formal education system that we have largely in the West for any time soon. They are going to be here. We know that tests test a limited amount of information, but there are skills to passing tests. And so my approach is this. There will be times that educators need to teach to the test. There will be some shortcuts that students, young people will need to learn in order for them to memorize pieces of facts that they can regurgitate quickly under pressure in test situations. That's part of the learning process. It is a part. So whilst we want to do all of the other things that I've talked about in my 18 strategies so far, then one of the things that we need to be aware of is how do we pass tests, and how we pass tests or how we support our students to pass tests is to be able to focus on small pieces of information that they can regurgitate within a specified time frame that may not need elaboration on, but sometimes they do. And the only way that you do that, going back to the athlete analogy, is to practice, practice, practice. To have some real practice answers to questions that you know are going to come up. So you know that such and such a question is going to come up. You've rehearsed a very, very simple answer. Whether you understand fully the concept or not is neither here nor there. That's one of the strategies that's needed to pass tests. I look at it this way. If you were a gymnast and part of your routine was to do a piece on the floor, not using any equipment, the bars or the rings or anything else, etc. It's just the floor. And in this particular piece, you know that the judges are focused on 6 particular pieces of movement or maneuvers, a particular jump, a particular twist that has to have, 3 turns in it and a corkscrew or whatever. I don't know the technical terms. Although you know 36 different pieces of floor work, for the test, i.e. for that competition, and for that particular section in the competition, which is just floor work, you're just going to focus on 6 movements, 6 maneuvers, and you're going to practice and practice and practice until you get them right. And I would imagine, I am not a gymnast, that most of my practice is going to be on those movements that come least easily to me. Those things that I find most difficult. Those things that I find most challenging. So you know 36 moves, but you know that the competition is only focused on 6. So you practice those 6. And I would suggest that you don't practice those 6 months and months and months and months and months and months and months. Yes, they'll be incorporated into the general training package, but the focus is going to become more intense, more forensic, the closer you are to the competition. And of course, there'll be built in there some times of rest when you are not focusing on that. That's the way you approach a test. Number 19. Learning should not always be a sedentary or solitary occupation. What do I mean by that? Get up and move as and when appropriate. So, I often go now to my local library to use the internet and do pieces of research. the likelihood is that I could really be sitting at that computer for 2 hours, if not longer, without having moved more than my fingers on the pad. I couldn't, I could quite easily sit there and not have moved at all. I train myself now with an alarm or with some other mechanism, silent alarm obviously in the library, to get up and move after an hour. Now, it may mean that I move away from the computer screen, go and find a reference book, still focusing on the area that I'm looking at, find the section that I want in the reference book, look at the 2 paragraphs that I need to read, and read them while standing or moving. And then when I get back to my desk, I'll make some notes. So this whole thing about being sedentary and sitting, it sits in the same area as being hydrated, and it sits in the same area as working with your peers. These are all habits that you need to cultivate in yourself. Aligned to this, number 20, have mental warm-up stroke stretching activities to get the particular part of the brain working that you need to be working for the area that you are looking at. So, what do I mean by mental warm-ups, mental stretching activities? Instead of just jumping into the piece of learning, instead of just sitting down to write or to answer a question or to draw something, warm up. Warm up that bit of the brain that you're going to use. Now, for me, music is a great warm-up. There may also be meditations that you do, and I would encourage parents and young people to look at positive meditations that they can use for going into study and also for consolidating the study process once they have finished and are now moving into a place of rest and regeneration. And finally, let's go old school. Number 21, read and write. Read for information, read for enjoyment, read for ideas, read for inspiration, read to warm the soul, read to heal. Just read. You may be like me and have lots and lots of books around that you dip into every now and again. I make a conscious effort to read every day. It may not be a full chapter from a book. It's more than likely going to be articles online. I read the newspapers every day online, and I dip into those sections which give me an opportunity to do a longer read on something that I'm interested in Guardian online, and also with the Gleaner out here in Jamaica. I read. I make an effort to move some of the books off my bookshelf onto my desk so that they are at hand to dip into. And I read magazines. I love magazine articles on things that I'm interested in. It opens up the creative side. So I read in total quite a lot. I'm not great on instruction manuals, but I read quite a lot. What about writing? In the technological age in which we live, it's very easy to sit at the computer and type. It's very easy to jot things down on our iPads or whatever sort of electronic notepad that we have. I have all of those things, but I also have my notebooks and I make notes. Why? The process of putting pen or pencil to paper, writing and committing words to paper is a very important tool for a student, a learner, a creator, which we are all of the above, to have. And so the process of writing, I have learned for me and for many, many, many other people, commits something to memory in a way that typing it sometimes on the computer does not. And so when my hard disk on my computer died, along with 15 years, yes, 15 years worth of work, since recovered, I have to say, but there were a period of 8 months of mourning whilst that work had disappeared. I had to go back to memory. Now, thankfully, the process for me doing a presentation is often pen to paper first, then notes transferred to iPad, then notes from iPad transferred into a PowerPoint or Prezi presentation. Then I present, and often is the case, the PowerPoint, the Prezi presentation is there as a support to my oral presentation, my narrative. And there are simply prompts on the screen for me to use or not use. And sometimes the PowerPoint is there and I don't even refer to it for an hour. Why? Because the initial process of writing, when I sat down and put pen to paper, it was at that point that the idea went to the brain, where it grew and grew, often, in my case, into a narrative around which I weaved my presentation. So there we have it. 21 habits, 21 strategies for being an effective learner. As I said at the beginning, this is not an exhaustive list. I am sure there will be many out there who can think of many other things that they could add. But I hope that what it will do is to stimulate a discussion between parent and young person about the learning process, generate a few ideas about some things that they could be doing differently, and most importantly, looking for opportunities every day for that young person to create, to be a problem solver, to question, to think outside of the box, to take some calculated risks in the security of their own home, to fail, to make mistakes in that environment, and to learn from those mistakes. I hope it will provide an opportunity for that young person to at some point be the teacher, to be at some point the person who says, I've got an idea about how we can address this, and who knows where this can go. So I'm very upful and very optimistic about our capacity as a community to address the whole educational issue of so-called underachievement. All that this system is measuring is a tiny little piece of what our young people are capable of. We have to define the educational and the learning experience much more widely, and we will find that if we implement these strategies and those to come, We have another session where we'll be looking at strategies for educators, and then a final session where we'll be looking at community strategies. We're not looking at the theory, we're not looking at the ideology underpinning. We have enough of that, and we're all very knowledgeable of what the key issues are. But let's add these strategies to some of the wonderful ones that are already out there. Tende Moire.
Yo, this is Swiss So Solid. Africa Speaks Without Cable and Galaxy 102.5. Blaze the fire, 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 fire.
Okay. Counting all my blessings, learning all my lessons, asking all these questions, this thing called life. Though you may have less than, know that you're precious. Look into yourself for that peace of mind. Counting all my blessings, learning all my lessons, asking all these questions, this thing called life. Though you may have less than, know that you're still precious. Look into yourself for that peace of mind. Can't be the same man I was in 2006. Cause I increase in wisdom and pick up on all them tricks. And every time you see the kingdom, right, them want to take some of it. But now that is a different set of youth to govern it. It a go hard, it not go easy. Cause we coming well equipped. Overstanding to the fullness. What I know you never take is my essence and my spirit. Watch the Bible as it connect. Shining bright no matter how it's said. Counting all my blessings, learning all my lessons, asking all these questions, this thing called life. Though you may have less than, know that you're still precious. Look into yourself for that peace of mind. Counting all my blessings, learning all my lessons, asking all these questions, this thing called life. Though you may have less than, know that you're still precious. Look into yourself for that peace of mind. What is happiness without the present? A future without a cause, a way that represent. And there were times in my past I might have felt regret. Apologies that I ought to make, no say them yet. But I'm honestly thinking that I should do them now. You ever felt like you sinking and you ready to drown? I took the deepest breath I could and closed my eyes. Then I woke up more alive. It inspired me to count up all my blessings, learning all my lessons, asking all these questions, this thing called life. Though you may have less than, know that you're still precious. Look into yourself for the peace of mind. Counting all my blessings, learning all my lessons, asking all these questions, this thing called life. Though you may have less than, know that you're still precious. Look into yourself for that peace of mind. And your priority is this. How can you make society tell you what is rich? Not happy without it, you can't be happy with. The belly full but the heart feel empty still. House on the hill, nothing no wrong but while you build. Pray that the ones under the roof be free from ill. Pray everyone that is alive can feel the joy, whether raining or the sun day in the sky. I'll be counting all my blessings, learning all my lessons, asking all these questions, this thing called life. Though you may have less than, know that you're still precious. Look into yourself for that peace of mind. Counting all my blessings, learning all my lessons, asking all these questions, this thing called life. Though you may have less than, know that you're still precious. Look into yourself for that peace of mind. For that peace of mind. They're trying to take my peace of mind. They're coming for my peace of mind. I'm glad I got this peace of mind. And for my peace of mind. They're trying to take my peace of mind. They're coming for my peace of mind. I'm glad I got this peace of mind.
Now, my brothers and sisters, you're tuned to Africa Speaks with Al Kebalan and Galaxy 10 Galaxy Radio, www.galaxyafiwi.com. Tendai Mwari. Tendai Mwari, brother Olatunji. After powerful sister Rosemary Campbell, what did you, just your preliminary thoughts, my brother?
Tendai Mwari. As I say, I had very high expectations of Sister Rosemary's mini lecture. But I think even they were exceeded because I think there was so much in there which is practical and useful. And like you said at the end of of a lecture. And we said earlier, sometimes we can actually begin to stand up and kind of like face off with our intellectual rigor and our philosophy and ideology. But also, we just need to think of things that we can do on a day-to-day basis, things that we can actually engage in. Because, like we said earlier, wherever we are, we need to understand the learning process. And I don't think yet we've created a comprehensive education system, but a system is based on learning. And these are basic tools for learning that we need to think about employing in our own homes, in our own families, and own communities. So certainly it's very important that we try and begin to practicalize our approach to education alongside the ideology and the philosophy, which are important, but we need to practicalize it as well. And I think Sister Rosemary's given us 21 invaluable strategies to start that process for us all. Tendai Mari.
Tendai Mari, my brother. Tendai Mari, greetings. Sister Rosemary, are you there?
I certainly am.
Oh, wonderful.
How are you?
I'm giving thanks and praises, my dear sister. I just want to say, first of all, I want to say tatenda to the Creator for blessing us in where are you in Jamaica again?
I'm at a lovely place called Boardwalk. It's a restaurant, hotel, and bar.
Oh wow!
Overlooking the beautiful Caribbean Sea.
Yes, she sent a picture.
It's in Negril, Hanover.
All right, I understand. For even further torture, you sent us a picture as well. Is that correct? Thank you.
Yes.
I thought we were in sunny Hanover again. I was just gonna give thanks and praises for. I'm gonna big up the whole of Jamaica, including Hanover and that lovely spot where you are as well, for blessing us with such a wonderful reception. We give thanks and praises.
Absolutely right. Give thanks.
Indeed. My dear sister, we have just heard your lecture 1, and very, very uplifting it was too. For those of us who even deign to call ourselves educators, which in my mind all parents are fundamentally.
Absolutely.
I think it's it is very instructive and very practical, and also it's very flexible as well, which is important.
Yeah.
In this day and age. So what was the sort of the inspiration in terms of this toolkit, if you like?
Well, to be honest, I've been asked about some practical strategies for students over the years, and it's one of the things that educators and parents alike find a little difficult to do, because we're so overwhelmed with the educational content of the recognized learning that takes place in school, that too little time is spent on the process of learning. And one of the things that I've learned over the many years is that the best teachers are craftsmen and craftswomen in terms of understanding the process of learning and getting students to understand how they learn best. So that's why I've located the strategies very much within a practical framework that gives people very clear ideas that they can do anywhere and at any time to develop the learning muscles in our students.
Tendai Mari, right? I mean that that really sums it up, my sister. I find that when you get a practical appreciation of something, there is so much more depth. You're so much more confident in being able to communicate and express, what you've done. So I was really glad about that focus on the practical. Right, but I wanna start with your first approach, enhancing your learning as if you were an athlete in training. Now, this is something that I know, with my own children, I know because they love sports so much, the boys, it's very easy to do that. I focus on somebody who he's not my particular favorite footballer, but in terms of his example, this guy called Ronaldo, um, he 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 is an example of somebody who um, takes learning, growing, and developing extremely seriously because he was somebody who had quite a bit of skill, but yet, there are a lot of skillful footballers who don't get anywhere. But he's continued to hone his talents, his abilities, etc. There are a few others, who have done that. So this analogy, I think it's very apt for most of our children, particularly boys I'm speaking of now, who love sport. And you could use those kind of examples to, really get them to focus. How do you find that particular scenario, my sister?
Yeah, and I think the example of Ronaldo is absolutely spot on. You see, I think one of our problems is that we approach the learning process too casually. We think that if we put our children in school uniform and send them to school clean and tidy and relatively well fed, then that's job done. And actually, what we need to be thinking about much more strategically and carefully is how we develop the kind of lifelong habits that we want in our children, growing them into young people that will enable them to be receptive to learning. And that whole thing about being disciplined, about honing your craft, about taking the process seriously, and the big, big thing about being physically, emotionally, psychologically in the zone is really, really important. And I don't need to tell you about diet and health and well-being and the whole thing about how we reprogram the negative backing track that is often in our heads about what we can't do. So the analogy of the athlete for me works really, really well in terms of getting that across both to students, parents, and educators.
Okay, Tenamora, my sister. Okay, right. Okay, we got a few little technical issues that we're just gonna. Right. Okay. Right. We're back with you. Yeah. Okay. So you also another thing that you have mentioned. I just wanted to broaden it out a bit. Is the educational the environment that you're in as well. Um, when I used to study, I always used to want to be in a space that is when there's a lot of clutter, I
Yeah.
find it very difficult to focus because of the clutter. I like to be in a space which I'm in control of. I don't know how does that resonate with you in terms of the environment, the physical environment when you're learning.
Yeah, your physical environment has to be conducive to what it is you're trying to do.
Mm,
And so we're looking for spaces that are clean, tidy, orderly. All the ways that we need to be ourselves need to be reflected in the space around. So free of distractions. For example, like music, and I often have music in the background.
right.
But I know, for example, that my husband is very different. He loves music, but when he's focusing in terms of doing the work that he needs to do, the music needs to be off.
That's me.
Okay.
Yeah, it needs to be
So
off.
it's all about people finding their own level.
Mm,
But you cannot learn. You cannot just be in chaos.
yeah.
And so people who find themselves in a chaotic, and I talk about the dirty because cleanliness is really, really important as well.
Yeah.
You know, as a teacher, I used to have a cloth in my classroom and go around and wipe the tables down, you know. And when we cut down on the cleaning budget in school so that windowsills and so on weren't cleaned as often as they normally were, we would walk around and clean windowsills. We need the place to be clean and tidy. It doesn't matter how simple and basic it is. So that learning environment needs to be conducive to a learning space. You know, many students find that meditation is a good thing, and it's one of the things that I'm going to be talking about next time with educators about how they create that learning environment within the confines of their classroom. You know, the classroom space can be a very safe space for students, even if the wider school environment is not. And you know, all the things that we can do in there, burning incense, the images that we have around us, the color of lights, all of that sort of thing. It's all about getting us up to a place where we are operating at our optimum best.
Absolutely. Give thanks. Right. Start by acknowledging and logging what you know. This is very interesting. This is not something generally you look at. So why this aspect?
Because organized schooling tends to focus on what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so students are used to being in an environment where their stress levels are raised, particularly if they're not particularly focused learners, because they know that the starting point is going to be what they don't know.
Right.
And
it's very interesting.
what we know as adults is that we learn best when we at least feel that there is something that we can bring to the learning process. And so it's part of the reprogramming that says, actually, let's start logging what we know.
Right.
So right at the beginning in schools, you know, in my first lessons in high school, I would start by getting to know the class in terms of their names, etc., etc. And my subject was English. And so one of the things that they would have to do is to give me their own profile of what they know in relation to that subject already, what they enjoy, what they can do, what they have expertise in. It gets your brain into a different place as a learner when you start from logging what you know.
All right. Okay. I thought you were gonna elaborate a little bit more there. Okay. Sorry. Go.
Okay.
No. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine because we
all right.
Good. we have got a few to go through. But when you were speaking there, I was thinking about, you know, when you broke down the etymology of the word, you know, education, you know, educare or educere, you know, the different pronunciations, but to tease out and to bring out, you know, what is already within. And, you know, Amos Wilson talks about, you know, awakening the natural genius in black children. It's that place that you're coming from, isn't it?
Absolutely right. You know, this notion that young people don't know anything, they don't bring anything to the process, they're empty vessels, leaves them open to the miseducation that sadly is the track for so many of them. And so parents need to be developing their young people, their children, in a very loving way to reinforce all the time what they know. And that means changing the language that we use with our children as well, you know. Use every opportunity to reinforce what they know, remind them of the last time they did something that was similar to the thing that you're asking them to do now. Get them to apply certain approaches like you do with your sons in terms of them being athletes, sportsmen, but also being students, to apply things that they do for leisure, and that they do well and that they do easily and that they do with enjoyment to learning processes, you know, and get them to literally log it as well, to not just to acknowledge it, but to log it in terms of writing it down, noting it down, so that they build up their own manual of this is how I learn, and this is what I know, and actually I know quite a lot.
Yeah. And I want to go. I want to go a little bit deeper into that. What in terms of the actual mechanical process, which you've highlighted in one of your points, but also the points that you're making is so much more important for our children whose educational experience is normally one where their confidence is being tampered with, in some cases is being shattered in the so-called education system as well, so it heightens it even more.
Yes, absolutely right. And you know, one of the things that there are several things that I'm going to be talking about when we get to the strategies for educators, where it's building that confidence, finding ways, for example, to train students to challenge within boundaries. You know, it's one of the things that many of us as African educators do sort of undercover in school. You know, it limits the damage of the schooling process if we take time out to school our kids about how they navigate that space. You know, and any educator who's listening to this will remember the many conversations they've had to have in their car, out in the corridor, out on the street, wherever they see the students around, how they manage a certain situation, what they have to do in order to just negotiate the space, so that part of what we're protecting our young people from all the microaggressions that can take place, mainly in secondary schools. Primary schools tend to be a little more nurturing, but as the youngsters become older and more challenging, and sometimes very rightly so, of the system that they are a part of, then these microaggressions teach them to stay in their place, conform, keep quiet. And so for many of our students who just can't do that because they haven't got the skills that they need to remain sane, remain who they are, grow into who they are, but navigate the hostile environment that sometimes is school. Sometimes is school.
And the secondary school also, it's like you're isolating the parents from the children, because that picking up the children from school now, you don't have that. You know, you have to make numerous appointments just to see the form teacher. You know, it's all a barrier now. Suddenly they've just, you know, when they go into secondary school, so it's, you know, it detaches the parents even more, so that again heightens the role and responsibility of parents.
Yes, it does, and it marks a shift. It marks a shift in terms of your relationship with school when your children are in primary and when your children are in secondary, and it's something that we just need to be cognizant of and not worry about it too much. It means that there is going to be more that we have to do at home, and that we are going to have to limit the engagement with high schools, with secondary schools, to what is permissible within the system, and not get too frustrated about that. But, you know, get onto governing bodies if we've got the time to be a little bit more proactive. Get onto the half-dead PTA them if we can, and see what we can and see what you can do via that route. But
invest the time outside of school anyway, because the other thing that this coincides with actually is that our children probably don't want to see us too much in the school environment at secondary level anyway.
Yeah.
You know? So, there's that whole kind of programming thing going on where, they want to be independent. They don't want to be seen, mom and dad down there every 5 minutes. All good, all good. We find another way to support the learning process because this is the time when they begin to get switched off.
Yeah.
And so this is the time where we have to shift gear in terms of moving that learning process into something that is highly incentivized, builds on what they know and enjoy, because that's the way that we're going to sustain, their interest in learning, and that we're just more creative about the time that we spend with them when we go away. Even for small trips out, there are opportunities for them to learn, and there are opportunities for them to teach us things.
Yes.
And one of the things I'm wondering whether it was in the list that I gave this time around, or whether it's in my educators list, but for learners to have the opportunities to be teachers. Secondary age students having the opportunity to be teachers in their home is how we begin to build those muscles of, being a little bit more self-determining, a little bit more adventurous, and a little bit more confident in terms of them growing up into young adults.
Okay. All right, Tinamari. Brothers and sisters, you're tuned to Africa Speaks with Al Kebel on Galaxy Radio, www.galaxyafewi.com. Galaxy is the only de-brainwashing station. We're blessed to have with us brothers and sisters all the way from a beautiful place in Jamaica, a beautiful bar with all the wonderful things going on in Jamaica, a sea view and all kind of picturesque beach surroundings. Just setting the scene for you, brothers and sisters. And it's a beautiful learning environment. we wish we were over there to learn together, but sadly we're in the cold of Britain with about 50. I don't know about you, Olatunji, but I got about half a dozen layers on already. I got my hat on, I got my hood on. I'm like one of them street. You know what I'm saying? I'm cold already, and it's only what they call autumn. And slight digression there, brothers and sisters. Let's get back, let's get back on track. We're blessed to have Sister Rosemary Campbell ministering to us and enlightening us with various different, very, very straightforward things that we probably don't think of, because as she quite rightly said, when we think of education, we just focus on that narrow academic, we must get this, you must get this, but looking at education in its true context, in its broader, holistic context. This is the beauty about what our dear sister is ministering even to us this evening. We're going to open the lines, brothers and sisters, if you want to engage with our sister. We have some texts that we're going to get through shortly, but we're just going to inform you of the numbers to call in, or the number to call in, which is 020-7193-0174. That's 020-7193-0174. That's the number to call, brothers and sisters. You have been already texting us, but just for those who don't have the number, you can text us on 07-377-920-703. You have some text there, brother Olatunji? Tenamre.
So we'll go to that. Give thanks, Brother Marcus Culture. Just get to the question. I'd like to ask a guest what she thinks about assumptions or beliefs in contrast to proven facts in a process of learning. Ashley.
Did you get that question, Sister Rosemary?
No. Could you just repeat it again, please?
Greetings. This brother Marcus Culture has a question he'd like to ask you. What do you think about assumptions or beliefs?
Maybe that's it, ringing
He's ringing the wrong line.
ringing the wrong number.
Assumptions or beliefs in contrast to proven facts in the process of learning. That's the question, sis.
I'm not quite sure what the questioner means. I'm not sure whether he is saying that the strategies that I suggested are assumptions and beliefs.
No, he's not saying that, because I think he also did say he missed a lot of the strategies, so he's just kind of catching the interview part of the thing. So it's not. I don't think it's based necessarily on the strategies that you laid out. It's basically a maybe a general question about beliefs and facts.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe Brother Marcus can ring in.
I hear you.
Any response?
Feeling is that there isn't enough application of what we really do know factually through research about the learning process in classrooms, except very intermittently. And so what can then happen is that what you get are educators just generally working on assumptions and beliefs and often stereotypes of their thinking about what students are capable of, and also what they themselves are capable of as teachers. So in that respect, I'm agreeing with the questioner that too much of the practice is probably based on assumptions and not facts about the learning process. And so much of what I'm going to be saying next time to educators is really going to be drilling down on the research. And research for me is a very broad brush thing, because I believe that in 40 years of educating, I've been doing a lot of action research that can be borne out by the facts of which can be borne out from what I know absolutely to be true about learning. So I'm in agreement with the questioner that we need to move away from assumptions to facts.
Okay, give thanks. Right, you've got there is so many things in the points in the 21 points that I'd like to elaborate on, and I'm looking at the clock, but I'm going to try and get through as many as possible. Now, number 4, you talk about seek, plan, be open, and create opportunities for learning. You there, sis? We got quite a bit of background.
Yes, I am.
All right. Okay. The bar's getting lively by the sound of it.
No.
All right. Okay. Something.
Clear, you know.
Oh.
Could be that you're just picking up, I don't know, the sound of the sea. There's not much going on otherwise.
Okay. All right. Okay. Right. Yeah. Now that is an interesting one, because, like, for example, I think sometimes as parents, there are many opportunities that maybe we don't seize. I know, for example, when I used to drive my son to school on the North Circular, and if anybody knows the A406, there's times when you move very smoothly, but there's times when you know you're not going anywhere for a good hour or so. And when I used to take my children to school going down the North Circular, and if there's any problems on the road, I used to use that opportunity to ask him questions. We used to do tables together, his times table, and I used to. Is that the sort of thing that you're referring to, or is it more sort of broader? Seize any opportunity.
It's seizing any opportunity, and that opportunity that you've just described is an excellent one. But it's also about just having conversations that don't necessarily feel as if they're
in class.
doing a test. So it's having really structured conversations
Right.
about things. Questions are very important, and encourage them to ask questions. What do they think about such and such? Something that you watched on the TV the night before, something that was in the newspaper that you read about, something that they saw online,
Mm.
And it's about encouraging them to bring stuff to you as well.
Right.
You might set up something that is about, teach me one thing a week,
Mm-hmm.
something new that I want you to teach me that you know about, that that I don't know about.
Yeah.
One week. So it's that sort of thing. It's allowing them to try things, in the kitchen, cooking, experiments, blend. Well, I say experiments because I'm saying, get them to experiment
Yes.
with menus, get them to blend fruits, blend veg, try and get them to come up with different recipes for different things that you might be focusing on as a family in terms of health. And
even teaching them about different fruits and veg, because many of our children don't know fruits and vegetables from the Caribbean, from the motherland, even over here.
Absolutely. And get them to do the research. So if for example, one of the things that you might be saying as a family is that, we have to cut down on the additional sugar and salt, then it's getting them to do the research in terms of, these are our favorite foods at home. These are the things these are our favorite kind of meals. How can we still make them, tasty and look good and all the rest of it, when what we're trying to do is cut down on the sugar and cut down on the salt and get them to do the research. It's things like that, so that just the normal pieces of life, becomes something that is a lesson, life lesson, without them even knowing.
Yeah. Well, what we're also doing is giving them what good old fashioned home training as well.
Absolutely.
Which is part of that holistic thing we call education. We forget the importance of home training, because I know many parents, particularly mothers, they're running around doing everything for the children, and the children don't, and if they feel exhausted and underappreciated or underappreciated loved, as Rastafari would say, and not knowing that they're actually creating that particular rod for themselves. Because I'm sure if they spent more time engaging the child, okay, they're gonna make mistakes. They're gonna they may not do the recipe right or whatever, make a mess.
Absolutely.
But that's all part of the learning process.
Yes. And the thing that I think we as African people need to be more aware of is the extent to which how we engage with our children around just normal domestic life impacts on their capacity to learn. So if, for example, we are very, very risk averse, or very, very, we rise to anger quickly when things go wrong. And so, the subliminal message is never, ever make mistakes. Then you don't put yourself in a position where you can learn easily, because you're always in that safe territory, where safe in inverted commas, where I'm not going to try anything, because if I try and it goes wrong, the consequences for me are not good. So it's for us as parents to create the opportunity where sometimes there can be a little mess, sometimes there can be a mistake, because actually that's where great learning takes place.
Absolutely.
As long as not putting people in danger, or the consequences aren't dire in terms of that mistake, it's okay. and it builds confidence in young people.
Absolutely.
And not only that, actually they learn quickly. You know, they won't be repeating that mistake again of putting too much cider vinegar in the blend. You know, they won't do it again. But we just need to be, and educators are the same. You know, classrooms are supposed to be places of experiment, places of discovery, not places of sit down quietly and do this, do that, conform. We want risk takers. We want people who are challenging. We want people who are inquiring. And so create the space that where that really can be a reality. And everybody in the home needs to be on the same page. So dad can't be saying one thing about that and then mom saying another.
Absolutely. Absolutely, my sister. Right. And this kind of incorporates the element of fun because, you know, for me, every single mistake is a learning opportunity and a learning experience. So I don't necessarily frown on mistakes, whether you're an adult or a child, you know. And I think if we sort of have a more relaxed, you know, and bring a more fun attitude, you know, you can laugh at yourself for making a mistake, but you also know that there are consequences to this mistake, and you know you don't want to be in that particular position as well. It kind of lightens lightens your load and takes some of the pressure off, don't you think?
Absolutely, it does. And again, you know, I think sometimes understandably, because it's a serious business bringing up children, we're a little too earnest, as you say, you know, a little bit too, you know, serious about everything. And so the children, some children may well thrive in that kind of environment for a short period of time. But I think oftentimes you find that they just want to broke out.
Yeah.
After that, you know. So it's about the extent to which there can be fun.
Okay, we didn't
Together.
All right. We missed a little bit of you, Sister Rosemary. I think the last word you said was it could be fun.
Yes, absolutely. It could be fun and sheer joy.
Right.
You know, we should look for periods of joy in each day.
And you find that that's what children want. They just want fun at that age, even when they get older. You know, that's what they want, fun. And you know, we have to remember that, you know, we were children once too, and that's exactly what we wanted. We wanted fun. We didn't want this, you know, just rigid regime. You know, rigidity has its place, but it needs to be balanced in, you know, in a non sort of pressuring, non sort of threatening environment.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, as an educator, as a teacher in school, the moments that you call like your Kodak moments as you're walking around your school as a head teacher or a senior leader is when you hear, you know, that hilarious giggling of students just rolling around you. See the teacher, you know, being part of it, that joyous, you know, enjoyment of each other, enjoyment of the time, enjoyment of what is going on. And those are the things that the kids remember as well.
Yeah.
You know?
The fun moments.
Things that they remember. You remember when dad? You remember when mom?
Yes. Normally when you as a parent mess up, they remember that very well.
Absolutely. So life is hard enough. We don't need to make it any harder. And, you know, we don't want this developing these learning muscles, these learning habits to become another chore. It needs to be something that becomes part of just how we are as people, you know, how we are as people. And the openness and the communication and talking is what we need to get much, much better at.
Absolutely. Now, I wanted to go into this area because this is not something that we would generally focus on as parents. Note carefully how you learn best. Now that is a very, very important one. But before I go there, I want to just backtrack to some of the strategies that you were outlining. And I know that one of the things that parents would say, when we were talking about, creating opportunities and all the practical things we can do, a lot of parents would say, but I don't have the time. How do we get over that?
And that's why I say to them, or I say through the strategies, link them around the domestic things that you do anyway. If you think about the examples we've talked about, you take your kids to school in the car, you do that anyway. Preparing a meal to get together, you do that anyway.
Well, sometimes we don't. That's probably the adaptation that needs to be made, because many a time it is the mum in the kitchen or the dad in the kitchen, and the children are out there maybe with their face in front of the television. So maybe
absolutely
that is a way to revive the strategy. Bring them in the kitchen.
Absolutely, and fit it in with your family. If we're in a position, as you've just described, where mum is preparing the meal, for example, and the kids are doing something else. Sometimes their homework, which is right and proper.
Yes.
It might just be a weekend thing where they, part of what they are doing is joining you in the kitchen. It might be one day a week that they have the responsibility for taking some kind of role in preparing the meal. You don't have to be too regimental about it. We're being very realistic about our very real and busy lives. And it's not every time that you engage with your child that you want to have some big academic conversation about things, But there are going to be times where, without us going to too much trouble and just with a little bit of thinking and planning ahead, we can say, okay, let's try and do this. So, because what we're doing is developing the learning habits.
Right. Okay.
So it can be incorporated into our real lives, but just be realistic. About how that works. And obviously, it's not going to be every day in every situation.
Well, that's the flexibility of the strategies that you've outlined. You apply it to your own reality, but like the example that we gave, you can make certain adjustments as well in terms of your lifestyle without further inconveniencing you as a parent. Right. So I wanted to go into this note carefully. Point 6. Note carefully how you learn best. Now this is okay. Bear with me, my dear sister. We have a new system here, and I'm trying to work it out. Let me see if I can. Right. I will. Okay. Right. We have a caller on the line, and I'm not sure how to get hold of him at the moment. So I'm gonna. Brother Kwame from Nottingham, I'm gonna get back to you. We're gonna work out how this particular. We've just realized we've got a new learning experience that we have to a live learning experience that we have to sort out. So we're gonna work on that. And in the meantime, the number to call is 0207 193 0174. We're getting some technical support here. This is brilliant, as we speak. Sorry, my sister. We've just worked out the technology by the looks of it. Yeah. So yes, please let's go into this area now, where you're looking at learning styles and note carefully how you learn best. That is something that generally we don't look at, and it just develop that a little bit more for us, please.
Okay, so this is something that will be also talked about when I talk to educators, because it's one of the key light bulb moments when an educator is able to get a student to understand how they learn. It's
Okay.
a light bulb moment. Because too often what happens in a classroom of 25 or 30 is that there's an expectation for ease, and because there isn't enough time for individuals to learn in different ways, for everybody to approach learning in one particular way. The joy of being a learner in your home is that you have the space to be an individual and to really understand how you learn. So let me give you an example. Say between myself and my husband, if we have a journey to make, my general approach, even out here in Jamaica, is that I know generally the direction that I need to go. I know roughly what time it's going to take me to get there, roughly. I can put Google Maps on the phone and it'll help me if I get lost. And so I'm okay. My husband doesn't operate like that at all. He needs to know exactly where we are going precisely. He'll probably do a couple of days before to get there and find out all the routes, and he'll work out an alternative route in case there's a roadblock. He needs his road map as well as the technology, which he doesn't trust, and he'll be very, very specific about us going a particular way. And that translates into our home life as well.
Okay.
So if we get a new piece of electrical equipment, the first thing he's taking out of the box is the manual to read, beginning, end.
Is your husband there to represent himself, Sister Rosemary?
I think my husband is like most men, actually. Yeah. And so, and for me, I'm taking the thing out of the box. I generally think I know how it can work. I'm going to try this and try that. Might possibly electrocute myself. But I will do the try this, try that, because generally I have knowledge of other electrical things that I've used before that are similar, and until I get it right. And only when I fail miserably over and over again will I very grudgingly pick up the manual and look at it. Now, sometimes what we need to do is to get children to understand how they learn best.
Yeah.
That there is no right or wrong,
That's another important thing you said there.
Now, say in the maths curriculum, so you get a problem, you have to show the steps in terms of how you get to the solution.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying in terms of the learning process is that we get those children to log the steps, even verbally, of how they got from A to B. And so it begins to build patterns in their own mind about I learn best when I do this, that, and the other. And then it up into I'm a visual learner. I have to, see pictures, draw pictures, or I'm an oral learner. I've got to speak it, or I've got to movement is going to be the way that I learn. That's how we then get into the different kind of learning styles.
Okay.
But the thing.
Sorry, Sister Rosemary. I just want to get in Brother Kwame. He's been waiting patiently for a little while. I apologize.
Okay, please.
Yeah. Tena my Brother Kwame. Sorry for the wait there. We had a few little problems as you no doubt heard. We do it all live on this on this program. Tena Mwari. Tena my Brother Kwame, are you with us? Tena my Brother Kwame? All right, I'm pretty sure you're there, Brother Kwame. Tena my Brother Kwame? Okay, we're getting some. I think Brother. Okay, we're gonna leave Brother Kwame for a minute. Brother Kwame, just let us know when you're there. In the meantime, brothers and sisters, the number to call in on is 020-7193-0174. I think there's a few problems on the line. Brother Kwame call back. Okay, yeah. Sorry, my sister. Yeah. Right. With the learning styles, I also want you. I also wanted you to. Okay, that sounds like that's Brother Kwame again. We're gonna hook you up, Brother Kwame. We're gonna hook you up. My Brother Kwame, are you with us now?
You all the time. Greetings.
Sorry, my brother. It's just a matter of connection. That's all. We had a few little challenges here. Um, good to hear from you, brother Kwame. I'm gonna leave the floor open to you. We haven't got long left. I do apologize, brothers and sisters.
No, not at all.
Go ahead, my brother.
I just want to make this thing about this thing about time. I keep on hearing this thing about we haven't got time.
Mm,
You know, if we value right our children's education, and I give you a couple of examples. The way like black, a lot of black men, African men love their cars. Yeah,
yeah.
treat the car nice. They'll clean it.
Yep.
They'll polish it. They'll spend a lot of time with the car, and like what I mean. If they could go to bed with it, they would.
Mm.
Right? So because a lot of the black men value their cars, so they make it look crisp. Nice.
Mm-hmm.
The same way our women also, they spend their time in the hair salon trying to get that wig or weave on to look good, and because they value the essence of looking good, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying is that why don't we use that same verve that we have for our cars and for our hair to our children's education?
Mm-hmm.
Surely that must be paramount in our thinking, particularly when you have a child. Right? If you think for one moment that the white man is going to educate your child, then you're very, very much mistaken. And like I said, if you value underscore the essence of your children's education, then you will spend the time, the effort, and resources to ensure that your child is Africated as opposed to educated.
Mm-hmm.
Because we can't leave the Africation of our children to our enemies.
Mm-hmm.
That is, I think, that should be common sense.
Yeah.
Because, like I said before, education or Africation is an act of war. Right? They use education to brainwash our children from their African selves, and you wonder why our children are behaving in the way that they are. And even those who so-called go to university think they're better than the rest of us because they got a master's, they got a degree, because it's given to them from master. So what I'm saying is that we need to value, mothers and fathers out there, you need to value your child's education. Because if you don't value it, do you believe the white man's going to, do you think these racist white teachers in the schools and colleges and universities are going to value your child education if you don't value it?
Absolutely, my brother. Okay, well, thank you for that. Thank you for that, Brother Kwame. Point extremely well made. Tendamore, Sister Rosemary. Did you hear Brother Kwame?
Sir.
You there, Sister Rosemary?
I totally agreed with what he said.
Right.
Yes, I certainly am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. Yes, we can. Uh-huh.
Yes. Yes, I heard Brother Kwame and agree wholeheartedly with what he said.
Right. Okay. I want to move on to what you were speaking about in relation to the brain. I'm just looking at which point it was now. I know Brother Olatunji is going to help me. And I know you're going to help me as well. Aha.
16.
Learn about cognition of learning and how the brain functions. Point number 16. We haven't got a lot of time, but this is a very, very important subject. That something as parents, most of us, we it's not even something. Well, on a personal level, then as a parent, it wasn't something even on my radar. Go ahead, my sister.
Yes. Well, one of the things that I said about this particular strategy is that you don't have to have a psychology degree in education and brain function in order to pick up some very accessible articles about how the brain functions. So for example, understanding where memory sits in the brain, understanding where language sits in the brain, understanding how it is that the brain actually functions and works. So in doing that, you're able to optimize your brain function, basically, because you understand how language works, where memory sits, how you use different parts of the brain for different parts of for different things that you're trying to get it to do. And a big thing that I say to teachers, I remind teachers, is that the heart sends more messages to the brain
Very
than
interesting.
the other way around. And so the learning process is very much a heart business. And that's why it's so important that there's an emotional connection between children and those who are nurturing their learning, because and the intellectual, the bits that we locate within the brain, is actually a very, very secondary thing in terms of how learning really takes place. There's an emotional connection that happens with learner and teacher, for want of a better phrase, and really, but being very simplistic in terms of how I talk about it. And so once that emotional connection is there, and there is a sense of well-being, a sense of trust, a sense of love, a sense of understanding, a sense of nurturing, then the intellectual bits of information that we wanting children to acquire is a much more easy step.
Okay, Sister Rosemary, sorry to interrupt you there.
So
I do apologize. Sorry, I've got Brother Marcus on the line. Brother Marcus, I do apologize. Again, just wanted to get some stuff out. Sorry, my brother. Are you still there, Brother Marcus?
Yes, my brother. And, greetings, Sister Rosemary. Absolutely very important presentation you've done. And I hope that the Jamaican government is listening to this program.
Trouble.
So Ministry of Education should actually give you a position on in the ministry to help to spread this a great strategy, learning strategy, which you are developing here. And I think if our people was to basically tune into Galaxy and hear this, I think they probably would be recommending that you engage with them as well, because I think this presentation shouldn't be a one-off in our life and in the lives of our children. And, if I might find a way of actually engaging, on an ongoing basis, Mr. Rosemary, so that we can actually get ourselves out of the kind of web which we have been. And I think Brother Kwame was actually kind of suggesting that as well. We need to get out of that belief that we can't do, and in terms of learning. I know back in the days, people used to say, don't study too hard, boy, you might bust your brains, and those kind of, belief systems which we need to get out of.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Okay, we'll give thanks, Brother Marcus. Thank you very much for your contribution this evening. Tendai Mwari. Okay, brothers and sisters, that was Brother Marcus. Sister Rosemary, I'm sorry that we've run out of time. In fact, we've gone over time. We do apologize. SG Vibes, our next presenter, is in the building, ready to roll. Sister Rosemary, thank you very much for... you heard Brother Marcus and you heard how inspired he was, and I'm sure because we have many, I meet and come across many a silent listener who, because of the nature of Africa Speaks with Al-Kebulan, a lot of it is very instructive and they're just basking in the knowledge, and I'm sure that's what they're doing this evening. Brother Marcus had the opportunity to give, his praise, which is definitely due to you, my dear sister. And some of these items, I didn't get to go through all of them, unfortunately, but some of them are very new to myself as a parent, that I know personally I can take, and I'm sure many other parents can take and apply to their role as parents. And brothers and sisters, we've got to remember we're all parents at the end of the day. So, whether you're auntie so-and-so, uncle so-and-so, nanny, whatever, nanny, you're still part of that village in the scheme of raising our children. The floor is open to you now, Sister Rosemary. Thank you very much again. And some closing comments and words of inspiration for us in the community. Tendai Mwari.
Tendai Mwari. I'd like to thank you again for the opportunity and for the work that the Alta Bulan Family Movement does in the UK. It's really outstanding work. And just to encourage you all that we're part of a really big global movement, whether it's the parent who's, educating, homeschooling their child at home, or whether it's the many, many educators that we've got who are writing about these things and actually working in a very, very positive way with our students around the globe, or whether it's the students themselves. As I said, I was really heartened by a clip of some African boys from St. Bonaventure's School in London working on a Friday evening, and that being captured by one of our African male educators, seeing that and him going in and having a conversation with those boys about learning. It just shows that really, in spite of everything and because of everything, we are in the zone, we're still here, and we are really moving forward as a people. So I want people to be positive about this. I want them to use the positive strategies and definitely tune in next time for the educators, because we're going to step it up a gear next time in terms of the educators. Number one on the educators list, rites of passage towards building your learning tribe. Don't miss it.
All right. Tendai Mwari, we give thanks, Sister Rosemary. It's always a pleasure. And our love and regards to your husband as well.
I will do.
Tendai Mwari. Okay. Tendai Mwari, brothers and sisters, this has been Africa Speaks with Al Kebulan and Galaxy Radio, www.galaxyafiwi.com. Join us again next week between 8 and 10, where we talk it straight and make it plain. What do you have for us, Olatunji, to move us smoothly into SG Vibes? SG Vibes, brothers and sisters, SG Vibes is back.
Something a little jazzy, sisters and brothers, Roberto Fonseca, and a track called Family.
All right.